Hello, and welcome to a story that will challenge everything you thought you knew about aerial combat in World War II. On a cold November day in 1943, over occupied France, a single American fighter took to the skies, and never returned the same. That aircraft, a massive P-47 Thunderbolt nicknamed Beetle, would reveal shocking secrets about the true power behind Allied victory. Secrets that even the Germans had underestimated. Imagine this. A fighter so large and heavily armed that German pilots initially dismissed it as sluggish, only to discover it could dive faster than their own aircraft, with armor nearly impervious to their best weapons. Or ask yourself, how could the Germans, with their advanced engineering, fail to grasp the true strength of the American aircraft they studied after capturing them? Could a fighter weighing nearly 10,000 pounds truly outmaneuver the nimblest German fighters? And what did it mean for the entire course of the war when the Germans finally dissected these captured machines, only to realize their industrial and technological superiority had already sealed their fate? These questions form the core of a larger mystery. How did American industrial might, from mass production to advanced turbocharged engines, outpace German innovation so decisively? Was it luck, or was there a deeper secret, one hidden in the engineering, the materials, and the very philosophy behind American aircraft design? I promise you, this video will take you through the entire journey. We will peel back the layers of technology, analysis, and strategy to reveal a shocking truth. That victory in the skies was won not just by pilots or tactics, but by relentless industrial capacity and technological innovation that the Germans simply could not replicate. And now, the real story begins, right here, with the first chapter of this extraordinary aircraft's journey from the skies of Europe to the testing grounds of its enemies. On the 7th of November in the year 1943, a significant event unfolded over the skies near Carpic Airfield in the occupied region of France. The day was marked by the fierce and relentless headwinds sweeping across the English Channel, winds so strong and persistent that they drained fuel supplies at an alarming and unprecedented rate. Second Lieutenant William E. Roach, a dedicated pilot serving with the 358 Fighter Squadron within the 35-5 Fighter Group, watched helplessly as his aircraft's gauges steadily descended toward zero. His Pratt & Whitney R2800 engine, which had powered him through countless missions, suddenly began to sputter ominously, signaling that fuel reserves were dangerously depleted. Standing at this critical juncture, Roach faced an agonizing decision: continue on his course with the dwindling fuel or attempt an emergency landing on unfamiliar territory. Ahead of him stretched a landscape of patchwork fields in France, some clearly friendly and others under the control of German forces. Amid these fields, one airfield bore a striking resemblance to the well-known Allied bases he had trained at, yet its true nature was uncertain. With little choice left and time slipping away, Roach committed to his approach, determined to reach safety or, at the very least, to avoid catastrophic failure. His massive aircraft, a Republic P-47D Thunderbolt bearing the serial number 4222490 and affectionately nicknamed Beetle, descended smoothly onto a grass strip that was surprisingly similar in appearance to an Allied airfield. Following a ground vehicle to a designated parking area, Roach shut down his powerful engine, finally allowing himself a moment's relief. It was only after powering down that Roach noticed the markings on the nearby aircraft, specifically, the Balkan Crow insignia, signaling that these planes were operated by the German Luftwaffe. In an instant, the reality of his situation shifted dramatically. The enemy he had been fighting in the skies moments earlier now surrounded his cockpit, rifles aimed and ready to fire. The combat pilot's war, at least for the moment, was over. William Roach's role in this conflict was coming to a close, but what lay ahead promised to be an entirely different kind of confrontation. He would spend the remainder of the war at Stalag Luftwaffe, a prisoner of war camp, but the lessons that the Germans would learn from examining his aircraft, Beetle, would lead to revelations that neither side could have anticipated. What the Germans uncovered when they disassembled and studied this captured American fighter would fundamentally challenge their understanding of American industrial strength and technological ingenuity. The P-47 Thunderbolt was far more than just a formidable fighter aircraft. It was a testament to American engineering ethos, production might, and material abundance. Over the subsequent 18 months, German engineers carefully disassembled, tested, and flew captured P-47s, confronting an uncomfortable truth that would reshape their perceptions of wartime technology. It became clear that Germany had not merely fallen behind in the global technological race but had been competing in a fundamentally different category of industrial warfare altogether. The story of these captured Thunderbolts, especially in the hands of the Germans, revealed how overwhelming material superiority, when harnessed effectively, could render tactical skill and pilot finesse increasingly ineffective in changing the overall course of the war. The significance of the Thunderbolt extended beyond its immediate combat capabilities. It served as a teacher to German engineers, imparting lessons they desperately needed but ultimately could never fully apply within the constraints of their own country's resources and industrial infrastructure. The capture of William Roach's P-47 on that cold November day was not an isolated incident. The Luftwaffe had encountered the Thunderbolt in combat multiple times before. Their pilots had been engaged with these massive American fighters since April of 1943, when the 4th Fighter Group first escorted B-17 bombers into hostile European skies. Initial combat reports from the German Luftwaffe reflected a mixture of disdain and bewilderment. German pilots, accustomed to the nimbleness of aircraft like the Focke-Wulf FW-190 and the Messerschmitt Bf-109, found the American fighters to be unnervingly large, somewhat sluggish at lower altitudes, and seemingly designed by engineers who had never fully appreciated the tactical demands of aerial combat. The Luftwaffe had come to understand certain truths about their adversaries through careful observation. Throughout the relentless months of spring and summer in the year 1943, combat reports from various German fighter units continually highlighted the P-47 Thunderbolt's notable shortcomings, particularly its sluggish climb rate, cumbersome handling at lower altitudes, and what was perceived as a reluctance among American pilots to engage in traditional turning dogfights. These reports painted a picture that many experienced Luftwaffe pilots initially believed to be quite accurate: that the Thunderbolt was inherently inferior in design, vulnerable to being outmaneuvered at the medium altitudes where the majority of aerial battles took place. This assumption, however, proved to be catastrophically misguided, as further analysis of the same combat data revealed nuances that challenged the narrative of American inferiority. Some details within those reports hinted at a far more formidable opponent than the Luftwaffe had anticipated. Pilots observed that once a Thunderbolt decided to disengage from a fight and entered a dive, it was nearly impossible for pursuing fighters to catch it. They also noted the staggering firepower of the aircraft, armed with 8 heavy machine guns that could unleash devastating volleys when American pilots chose to engage. Furthermore, the reports detailed the aircraft's armor protection, which appeared to be nearly impervious to the standard 792mm rounds used by German fighters, and even capable of resisting hits from 20mm cannon fire. Most troubling of all was the resilience of the Thunderbolt's structure. Despite sustaining severe damage, these aircraft often continued flying for considerable distances before limping back to base, sometimes riddled with missing sections of wing, leaking oil from damaged engines, or with control surfaces shot away, yet still under the command of their pilots. Such aircraft, even when battered beyond initial recognition, remained controllable and maintainable in flight, silently challenging the Luftwaffe's assumptions of vulnerability and obsolescence. The moment of critical insight arrived when Lieutenant Roach's intact Thunderbolt finally rolled to a halt at a Luftwaffe airfield in Karpik. This presented a rare opportunity for the German forces to examine firsthand the aircraft they had until then only observed in combat or captured in fragments. Recognizing the strategic value of a complete, undamaged example, local Luftwaffe personnel swiftly secured the aircraft under armed guard, preventing any possibility of sabotage or accidental damage. The American insignia and markings were promptly painted over, replaced with the German Balken-Crower insignia on the wings and fuselage. Bright yellow paint, designated RLM-04, was applied on the undersurfaces and tail, in accordance with Luftwaffe practice to facilitate identification and prevent friendly fire incidents, especially during chaotic dogfights or anti-aircraft barrage. Within a matter of hours, plans were set in motion to transfer the aircraft to Rechlin, the Luftwaffe's premier aircraft testing and evaluation facility, situated roughly 100 kilometers northwest of Berlin in Mecklenburg. Upon arrival, the aircraft was designated T9+FK, a code used by the Zirkis Rosarius Evaluation Unit, which specialized in testing captured Allied aircraft. Hans-Vera Lehre, a renowned test pilot and chief engineer at the Airprobung Stelle Rechlin, was assigned to conduct the initial evaluation flights. Lehre, who during the war would fly over 125 different aircraft types, never once crashing or causing serious damage, approached the P-47 with a mixture of professional curiosity and careful caution. He recognized the importance of understanding this formidable adversary's systems and capabilities before jumping to conclusions. His initial impressions, meticulously documented in his logbook and later published in his memoirs, revealed a pilot's keen analytical eye and a tempered respect for the aircraft's apparent durability and firepower, which defied the Luftwaffe's previous assumptions about its inferiority. During the tumultuous years of World War II, a remarkable story unfolded around a particular aircraft that had become emblematic of American aviation ingenuity, the P-47 Thunderbolt. This formidable fighter plane, widely recognized for its robustness and firepower, also harbored complexities that often surprised even seasoned pilots and engineers. Its cockpit, in particular, exemplified a level of sophistication that starkly contrasted with the more familiar German fighter designs, sparking awe and a touch of bewilderment among those who had to familiarize themselves with its many controls and systems. The cockpit of this aircraft was a labyrinth of instruments and levers, containing what appeared to be roughly twice the number of gauges found in typical German fighters of the era. Many of the levers and switches seemed esoteric, governing systems that had rarely, if ever, been encountered in German aviation technology. Among these controls were strange, unfamiliar levers, which managed systems that pilots could only grasp through careful study, since they had never been part of German fighter configurations. The complexity was emblematic of the American approach, an emphasis on advanced, integrated systems designed to maximize performance and reliability, even if they made the cockpit environment initially perplexing. One of the most significant aspects of the aircraft's complexity was the turbo supercharger system, a vital component for maintaining engine power at high altitudes. Unlike the straightforward or mechanically simpler systems in German fighters, the American turbocharger required a thorough understanding of exhaust flow management, a principle that was more theoretical in German circles but had become standard practice in American aviation engineering. Operating the turbo system effectively demanded precise management, as it involved controlling exhaust gases to optimize engine performance without overloading the system. The constant speed propeller, another distinctive feature, was designed to maintain a steady blade pitch, differing considerably from its German counterparts that relied more straightforwardly on manual adjustments. Perhaps most intriguing was the aircraft's elaborate automatic engine management system. While German pilots had traditionally handled engine controls manually, adjusting throttle and mixture as needed, this American design integrated automation to streamline engine performance. This system could adjust various parameters automatically, reducing pilot workload but increasing the complexity of understanding how the engine functioned during flight. For a test pilot, this meant a steep learning curve, as the pilot had to decipher a host of obscure controls and carefully experiment with them on the ground before attempting in-flight operations. In his memoirs, the test pilot, who went by the name Lears, vividly described the cockpit's bewildering array of controls. The P-47 cockpit could baffle even an experienced pilot, he wrote, acknowledging that despite his extensive flying experience, he initially struggled to grasp the purpose behind many of the levers and instruments. He recounted spending considerable time on the ground, methodically experimenting with each control and studying their layout before daring to take the aircraft into the air. This deliberate, meticulous approach highlighted his commitment to understanding an unfamiliar aircraft without the aid of detailed pilot manuals or operational documentation, a practice that underscored his dedication to safety and mastery. The process of starting the engine alone revealed an extraordinary level of sophistication, surpassing typical German standards. The Pratt & Whitney R2800 double WASP engine, with its 18 cylinders arranged in a radial configuration, demanded specific procedures to initialize the massive turbo supercharger system correctly. Lears approached these procedures with methodical precision, his engineer's mind cataloging each step and gradually inferring the purpose behind every action. Whether it was adjusting fuel flow, enabling supercharger modes, or ensuring the synchronization of various subsystems. Such careful attention to detail was vital in managing a power plant of this magnitude. When the engine finally roared to life, it produced a distinctive sound that was radically different from the sharper, more metallic bark of German inline engines or even the BMW 801 radial used in the Focke-Wulf FW190. Instead, it emitted a deep, resonant rumble that seemed to embody the raw power and enormous displacement of the engine. This sound spoke volumes about the engine's capacity, hinting at the tremendous reserves of power stored within each cylinder, ready to be unleashed. As the pilot taxied the aircraft, he could feel its weight through the controls, reminding him of the aircraft's impressive size and mass. The P-47 Thunderbolt was an imposing machine, weighing nearly 10,000 pounds when empty. This particular example still carried a significant amount of fuel and a full load of ammunition, pushing its total weight close to 13,500 pounds. To put this into perspective, the German Focke-Wulf FW190A8, one of the heaviest single-seat fighters in the Luftwaffe, had an empty weight of around 7,650 pounds and a maximum loaded weight of approximately 10,800 pounds. Clearly, the Thunderbolt's size and mass far exceeded many of its contemporaries. Indeed, the Thunderbolt was a genuinely massive aircraft for a single-seater, larger even than some twin-engine fighters operated by the Luftwaffe. As Lears advanced the throttle for takeoff, the scene opens on a vast grass field adjoining a transfer airfield, a quiet and seemingly unassuming backdrop for what was about to unfold. Once airborne, however, Lurch began to realize just how much he had misunderstood the true capabilities of the formidable aircraft he was flying. A machine that German pilots, who had fought against Thunderbolts primarily at low altitudes, had fundamentally misjudged. As he ascended into the sky, he carefully managed the turbo supercharger, allowing it to warm up to its optimal operating temperature, all the while gaining altitude and gaining a clearer picture of the aircraft's potential. Below approximately 15,000 feet, the P-47 Thunderbolt felt exactly as German combat pilots had described in their reports: heavy, sluggish in its turns, and lacking the agility needed to contend with fighter planes like the Focke-Wulf 190 or the Messerschmitt Bf 109. In this altitude range, the Thunderbolt's performance was unimpressive. Any seasoned German pilot flying a contemporary fighter could easily outmaneuver the American aircraft in prolonged, sustained turning battles, exploiting its sluggish response and mediocre rate of climb. It was clear at these lower heights that the Thunderbolt's true strengths were not immediately apparent, and its limitations laid bare for anyone paying close attention. Yet, once the aircraft ascended past approximately 20,000 feet, an astonishing transformation occurred in its behavior and performance. The turbo supercharger, which drew exhaust gases to boost intake pressure, became increasingly efficient as the air thinned with altitude. Unlike German engines, which struggled for oxygen and consequently lost power as they climbed higher, the R2800 engine maintained its full rated output at these greater heights, thanks to the turbocharging system. This meant that the aircraft's performance at high altitude was markedly superior to that of its German counterparts. At around 25,000 feet, an altitude where German fighters often operated at only about 70% of their sea-level power, the Thunderbolt's engine continued to push out its maximum rated power without any drop in performance. Lurch, feeling the surge of power, pushed the throttle forward at this altitude. The aircraft responded with an acceleration that was surprisingly vigorous for such a large and seemingly unwieldy fighter. Eager to test its high-speed capabilities, he rolled into a steep dive, and the Thunderbolt's response was exhilarating, almost violent in its eagerness to accelerate. In this dive, the P-47 surpassed speeds of 500 miles per hour, reaching velocities where the aerodynamic controls stiffened markedly due to airflow compressibility effects. At such extreme speeds, recovering from the dive required both hands firmly gripping the control stick and considerable physical effort to counteract the stiffened controls. Under these conditions, the aircraft was nearing the limits of what was then known as compressibility, the onset of aerodynamic phenomena that would not be fully understood until the jet age. Lurch was immediately struck by the aircraft's remarkable roll rate, which starkly contradicted the assumptions German pilots held about the heavy American fighter. Despite its considerable size and weight, the Thunderbolt could execute rolls faster than any German fighter he had flown, including the renowned Focke-Wulf 190, which was celebrated for its excellent maneuverability. This agility in roll, combined with its incredible dive speed, afforded the Thunderbolt a tactical advantage that German pilots had only partially appreciated. At high altitudes, a pilot in trouble could simply roll inverted and rapidly dive away at speeds that no German fighter could match, especially when considering the effects of compressibility that slowed down or destabilized other aircraft. German pursuit pilots attempting to follow would encounter compressibility effects that severely hampered their aircraft's handling, whereas the P-47's more robust airframe and superior controls allowed it to handle these phenomena more successfully. Lurch took the captured Thunderbolt through a meticulous and comprehensive test program, systematically exploring its flight envelope in accordance with standard evaluation procedures. His initial report contained observations that caused concern among Luftwaffe headquarters personnel, who still believed that German fighter designs held a fundamental advantage over the American aircraft. Yet, as Lurch's tests revealed, The Thunderbolt's true performance characteristics were far more impressive and complex than they had initially thought, challenging long-held assumptions about the capabilities of American fighters in the high-altitude environment. Hensive turbine system that significantly boosted the aircraft's high-altitude performance. At altitudes exceeding 25,000 feet, where aerial combat became more frequent as Allied bomber formations ascended higher to evade German anti-aircraft fire, the P-47 Thunderbolt was not merely on par with German fighters. It often outperformed them in critical aspects. Unlike what some might assume, the Thunderbolt's superiority was not solely rooted in raw maneuverability or rate of climb. In fact, it boasted specific technological advantages that effectively countered the Germans' typical strengths at high altitude, giving American fighters a decisive edge. Over the subsequent weeks, the engineers at Reikland's laboratory embarked on an extensive, meticulous examination of the aircraft, which bore the codename Beetle. They adopted a rigorous testing protocol aligned with the highest standards of military aviation research, documenting every component with photographs from multiple angles and measuring each element with precision instruments capable of detecting even tiny deviations. Their thorough analysis included weighing every significant part and assembly, as well as subjecting various systems to a variety of operational conditions to ensure durability and performance consistency. Special focus was placed on the turbo supercharger system, which was recognized as the primary technological difference between American and German high-altitude engines. The engineers' findings in this area were startling, challenging preconceptions held by many experts familiar with the resource-constrained nature of late-war German aircraft design. The engine at the heart of this system was the Pratt & Whitney R28000 double Wasp, a marvel of engineering. It comprised 18 cylinders arranged in two banks of 9, set in a radial configuration around a central crankshaft. The total engine displacement was measured at 2,845 cubic inches, which converts to approximately 45.958 liters. For comparison, the German BMW 801D engine displaced around 2,560 cubic inches, or roughly 41.88 liters. However, displacement alone did not account for the notable difference in power output between these engines. The R28000 was constructed with forged aluminum alloy pistons, sodium-cooled exhaust valves capable of withstanding extreme temperatures, and a high-grade steel alloy crankshaft forged with precision. German metallurgists inspecting the engine regarded the materials as second to none, materials they could no longer secure in sufficient quantities. The exceptional quality of American materials and the precision manufacturing processes used by Pratt & Whitney left the German inspection team in awe. Every component bore evidence of meticulous manufacturing, produced within extremely tight tolerances that ensured perfect fit and function. The surface finishes across all parts were uniformly smooth, reflecting the high standards of American industrial craftsmanship. The magnetos, essential for reliable ignition, incorporated materials increasingly scarce in Germany, further highlighting the technological gap. The spark plugs featured high-grade ceramics of superior quality, surpassing their German counterparts in durability and performance. The fuel injection system operated with a precision that Germans would have associated only with laboratory-grade equipment, an impressive feat for an aircraft engine expected to operate reliably under the harshest combat conditions. Most striking was the absence of any signs of material substitution or quality compromises, which had become more common in German aircraft late in the war due to resource shortages. The Americans had constructed this engine exactly as originally designed, using all specified materials without resorting to the improvisations that many German manufacturers had been forced to adopt in their desperate effort to keep up with wartime demands. The turbo supercharger system, integral to the engine's ability to perform at high altitude, revealed a level of engineering sophistication that Germany had attempted to develop but had never succeeded in implementing into operational aircraft. Exhaust gases from all 18 cylinders were collected through carefully designed manifolds and routed through insulated pipes along each side of the fuselage to a turbine unit situated behind and below the cockpit. This turbine, spinning at an incredible speed driven by the hot exhaust gases, powered a centrifugal compressor that significantly enhanced the engine's high-altitude capabilities. The entire system represented a leap forward in aircraft engine technology, underscoring the technological edge America had gained in high-altitude combat performance during the war. By the year of 1943, American aircraft engineers had achieved a remarkable level of technological sophistication in their fighter aircraft, particularly exemplified by the widespread deployment of turbo superchargers in their combat planes. This system was far more than a mere enhancement. It was an integral component of the aircraft's operational design, carefully engineered to improve performance at high altitudes. At its core, the turbo supercharger worked by utilizing exhaust gases to drive a turbine, an innovative approach that provided a continuous boost of compressed air directly into the engine's intake manifold. This method significantly increased the engine's power output, especially during high-altitude flights where thinner air would normally limit engine performance. Complementing this setup was an intercooler, a critical component designed to lower the temperature of the compressed air before it entered the engine. Since compressed air tends to heat up, raising its temperature reduces its density and can lead to engine knocking or even catastrophic damage through detonation. The intercooler mitigated this risk by cooling the air, thereby increasing its density, which allowed the engine to produce more power safely and reliably. The entire system was managed by an arrangement of automatic regulators that maintained optimal boost pressure and turbine rotational speeds. These controls ensured that the pilot did not need to manually adjust any parameters beyond setting the desired manifold pressure. Everything else was handled by the sophisticated automatic systems designed to keep the engine running at peak efficiency. While German engineers were well aware of the theoretical principles underlying these technologies, their practical application in mass-produced combat aircraft proved to be an insurmountable challenge during the war. By 1943, German industry was severely hampered by material shortages and manufacturing constraints. Their attempts to replicate such advanced systems were thwarted by the necessity for exotic high-temperature alloys capable of withstanding the intense heat generated by turbines spinning at thousands of revolutions per minute. These alloys had to resist extreme thermal stresses, and their production required precision casting and forging techniques that German manufacturers struggled to maintain consistently on a large scale. The control systems for the turbo supercharger demanded components of exceptional reliability and precision, features difficult to sustain amidst the chaos of wartime manufacturing. Moreover, the ducting that routed hot exhaust gases and compressed air had to be constructed from heat-resistant materials and sealed flawlessly to prevent leaks or failures. All these elements needed to operate flawlessly under combat conditions, which involved exposure to extreme vibrations, temperature fluctuations ranging from nearly -60 degrees Fahrenheit at high altitude to over 200 degrees Fahrenheit close to the engine, and the constant threat of battle damage. In contrast, the Americans had successfully overcome these challenges. They developed manufacturing techniques that allowed for the production of reliable, high-performance turbo superchargers and installed them as standard equipment on every P-47 Thunderbolt aircraft, regardless of mission profile or production batch. This was not a feature reserved for experimental aircraft or special missions. It was simply the way the P-47 was built. Thousands of these fighters rolled off the assembly lines equipped with this highly advanced technology, demonstrating an industrial capacity that German engineers found difficult to grasp fully. German technical reports, particularly those resulting from evaluations conducted in the late 1940s, acknowledged that the turbo supercharger system alone represented a level of engineering sophistication, specifically in materials, manufacturing precision, and quality control, that exceeded what German industry could reliably produce in such quantities at the time. The materials needed, primarily high-temperature alloys, and the manufacturing processes required, including meticulous quality assurance, were simply beyond the capabilities of German factories, strained further by strategic resource shortages, relentless Allied bombing campaigns, and the forced labor that replaced skilled German workers, often resulting in degraded standards of craftsmanship. Beyond engine and turbocharging technology, the American approach to aircraft armament further underscored their industrial abundance and meticulous attention to design detail. The P-47D, for instance, was armed with an impressive complement of 8 Browning M2 machine guns, each calibered at 50 caliber, with 4 installed in each wing. This was a deliberate choice to maximize firepower, even though it introduced additional weight and increased mechanical complexity. Each gun was independently fed from a dedicated ammunition box embedded within the wing structure, with each box holding an astonishing 425 rounds. The total ammunition capacity for the entire aircraft thus reached a formidable 3,400 rounds, enough to deliver sustained, concentrated firepower during combat engagements. Such a configuration reflected the American philosophy of prioritizing aggressive firepower and survivability over weight savings, demonstrating a clear focus on the tactical advantage provided by overwhelming output. The comprehensive integration of powerful weapons, advanced turbo supercharging systems, and robust manufacturing processes collectively embodied the technological and industrial edge that American aircraft production proudly maintained during the war. The armament of the P-47 Thunderbolt was a formidable feature that set it apart from many of its contemporaries. For a direct comparison, the typical armament configuration of the Focke-Wulf FW-190A included approximately 2,000 rounds of ammunition for its machine guns and around 500 rounds for its cannons. In stark contrast, the P-47 pilot had the capacity to unleash a devastating burst from all 8 guns continuously for roughly 20 seconds before depleting his ammunition load. The combined rate of fire approached 100 rounds per second, turning the aircraft into a veritable flying artillery piece. When all 8 guns were meticulously calibrated and aimed to converge at a single point in space, the volume of fire became overwhelmingly lethal. This precision allowed the pilot to deliver concentrated, destructive bursts that could obliterate targets with terrifying efficiency. German test crews, who examined the captured aircraft's armament system, documented these effects with awe, noting not only the destructive power but also the exceptional quality of the installation. The Germans were particularly impressed by the craftsmanship and reliability of the American design, which stood out even among their own standards. Each of the 8 Browning .50 caliber machine guns was mounted within a specially designed electrically heated bay to prevent freezing at high altitudes, where temperatures could plummet to 60 below 0 Fahrenheit or lower. This heating system ensured reliable operation, preventing the metal components from becoming brittle or jammed by ice. Spent cartridge cases and disintegrating belt links were collected and efficiently ejected through chutes and ports located on the underside of the wing, a design feature that prevented debris from damaging the aircraft or interfering with control surfaces during combat. The armament system performed flawlessly during testing in Vlan, where it endured firing thousands of rounds under a variety of atmospheric conditions without a single jamming or feeding malfunction. Moreover, the ammunition itself showcased American industrial excellence. The .50 caliber rounds employed armor-piercing cores manufactured to uniform and precise specifications, incendiary compounds that reliably ignited upon impact, and tracer elements that burned consistently, providing excellent visibility for aiming adjustments. Testing also revealed a significant advantage in ammunition quality. American-produced rounds proved to be more reliable than their German counterparts, which had suffered from declining quality standards as the strategic materials necessary for manufacturing became scarcer in the war's later stages. This reliability translated into higher combat effectiveness and consistency during engagements. The armor protection of the P-47 further underscored American strategic priorities, emphasizing pilot survivability over weight savings. The aircraft's cockpit was encased in heavy armor plates on multiple sides, creating what was known as an armored bathtub that offered substantial protection from below and behind. The windscreen was fitted with thick, bulletproof glass capable of stopping machine gun rounds and resisting fragments from cannon shells, enhancing pilot safety during intense firefights. Additional armor plates protected essential systems such as the oil coolers and the turbo supercharger, both of which were critical to aircraft performance and could be vulnerable to enemy fire. Altogether, the armor systems added up to more than 200 pounds in weight, roughly equivalent to the weight of adding 2 extra machine guns with ammunition. This weight penalty was a conscious trade-off favored by American designers to maximize pilot safety. In contrast, German fighters typically carried lighter armor, prioritizing speed and agility over comprehensive protection. This design philosophy accepted higher casualty rates among pilots as an unavoidable consequence of the emphasis on performance and maneuverability. The differences between American and German design philosophies extended beyond armor to maintenance considerations. American engineers designed the aircraft with accessibility in mind, recognizing that maintenance crews operating from forward air bases would need to service their aircraft rapidly, often in less than ideal conditions. They anticipated that repairs might need to be carried out at night, under bad weather, or even under enemy threat. As a result, every major component of the P-47 was accessible through large, easily removable panels secured with quick-release fasteners. This approach streamlined maintenance procedures, minimizing downtime and enabling mechanics to get aircraft back into combat quickly, which was a critical advantage in the fast-paced environment of wartime air operations. The quick-release fasteners, a hallmark of American aircraft design, required only simple tools to operate, allowing for rapid maintenance and repairs. When a major engine overhaul was necessary, it could be carried out efficiently in the field within a matter of hours, provided that standard hoisting equipment was available and the procedures were meticulously documented and followed. This ease of maintenance was a testament to the thoughtful engineering that prioritized serviceability, contrasting sharply with the approach taken by German aircraft designers. German fighters, which were typically intended for factory-level maintenance and major repairs, often demanded more extensive disassembly, reflecting their design philosophy and operational constraints. This fundamental difference in design philosophy was deeply rooted in the contrasting industrial realities of the United States and Germany. American manufacturing capacity, abundant and robust, allowed engineers to focus on creating aircraft that were not only effective in combat but also straightforward to maintain and repair in the field. The Americans could allocate significant resources to enhance maintainability because their industrial infrastructure enabled them to optimize aircraft for operational efficiency. In contrast, German industry, constrained by shortages and disrupted supply chains due to strategic bombing campaigns, often had to make do with less flexible, more resource-intensive designs. An exemplary illustration of American technological superiority lay in the aircraft's radio systems. The captured P-47 Thunderbolt revealed an advanced communications suite that far outpaced its German counterparts. It was equipped with an SCR-274N command radio, which facilitated both air-to-air and air-to-ground communication, ensuring reliable, clear transmission over substantial distances. In addition, it carried an SCR-515A liaison radio, providing supplementary channels for coordination. Both these units operated with superior clarity and range, effectively overcoming the interference issues that plagued German radios at the time. German radio systems, hindered by persistent interference problems, suffered from inferior component design and inadequate shielding, issues that American engineers had addressed through meticulous engineering and better materials. Furthermore, these radios were integrated into a sophisticated identification system, capable of automatically distinguishing friendly aircraft from potential threats. This automatic identification friend or foe, IFF, capability was a significant technological advancement, reducing the risk of friendly fire incidents. Such automated systems were still relatively novel in 1943. And this level of integration showcased the advanced state of American electronic warfare technology, which the Germans had yet to develop. Perhaps the most striking aspect that impressed German engineers was the overall quality and completeness of the aircraft. The P-47 Thunderbolt appeared to be built with precision and care, with every component seemingly representing the best possible version that American designers could conceive and manufacturers could produce. There was little evidence of material shortages impacting the quality, nor were there signs of substitute materials being used in place of the original specifications. This was noteworthy given the ongoing shortages and resource constraints faced by German industry late in the war, which often led to desperate improvisations and compromises in their manufacturing processes. German technical reports, especially those compiled at the Rechlin Aircraft Testing Center and disseminated through the Luftwaffe's technical services, consistently emphasized this point. They noted that the P-47 Thunderbolt was manufactured exactly as the designers had intended, adhering strictly to the specified materials and manufacturing processes without forced compromises. Such high fidelity to original design specifications underscored the American commitment to quality and precision, even amidst wartime pressures. As the war progressed, however, maintaining this level of manufacturing fidelity became increasingly challenging for German industry. The relentless onslaught of Allied strategic bombing severely damaged industrial facilities, reducing access to critical materials and disrupting supply chains. Despite these adversities, the American aircraft's construction remained remarkably consistent, as confirmed by the ongoing flight testing programs extending into the winter of 1943 and early 1944. During this period, additional P-47s were captured and brought back to the Rechlin testing facility for thorough comparative evaluation, serving as tangible evidence of the differences in manufacturing quality. On the 29th of May in the year 1944, another P-47 fell into German hands when 2nd Lieutenant Lloyd S. Hathcock of the 3001st Fighter Squadron, part of the 332nd Fighter Group, became disoriented during a mission. The details of this incident, like the broader assessment of American aircraft, highlighted the stark contrast in engineering approaches and manufacturing standards that characterized the aircraft used by the Allies versus those of the Germans. During a routine ferry flight, a pilot inadvertently landed at the enemy-controlled Rome Littorio airfield in Italy. His aircraft, a Republic P-47 Thunderbolt bearing the serial number 42-759-71, was swiftly seized by German forces. This particular P-47 had a notable history, having previously served as the personal mount of George Notney, a celebrated fighter ace credited with shooting down 8 enemy aircraft while flying with the United States Army Air Force's 317th Fighter Squadron. Once captured, the Germans transferred the aircraft to their testing and evaluation facilities located in Resseling, where it was initially assigned the designation 8+6. Later, on October 12, 1944, the aircraft was moved to the Zirkis Rosarius unit, an elite Luftwaffe testing and demonstration group, and was redesignated as T9 plus lowercase letters L and K. This transition marked its official entry into the Luftwaffe's experimental fleet, where it would serve as a testbed for tactical evaluation and enemy aircraft recognition. The extensive testing and data collection carried out at the Reikland facility provided valuable insights, leading to a set of tactical recommendations that were disseminated among frontline Luftwaffe fighter units. These guidelines advised German pilots that the most favorable engagement altitude against the P-47 Thunderbolt was below 15,000 feet. The reasoning was clear. The Thunderbolt's poor performance at low altitudes and its sluggish rate of climb granted German fighters a distinct advantage in that regime. Consequently, the Germans were instructed to capitalize on this weakness by engaging the American fighters in low-altitude combat. Furthermore, pilots were specifically cautioned against attempting to escape by diving away from attacking Thunderbolts. The aircraft's design allowed it to accelerate rapidly in a dive, enabling it to reach speeds that German fighters, which were less capable of sustained high-speed dives, could not match. The captured reports made it evident that even when damaged, P-47s often continued to fly effectively, sometimes beyond the point where German fighters would have been able to continue engaging them successfully. This resilience was a stark reminder of the formidable durability of the American aircraft. Given this resilience, the tactical approach for German fighters was to press their attacks with concentrated firepower and determination, rather than assuming that a few well-placed hits would bring the Thunderbolt down. Aggressive and sustained attacks were necessary to increase the chances of damaging or destroying the aircraft. However, while these tactical recommendations were useful on a pilot-by-pilot basis, they could not address the broader strategic challenge facing Germany in the air war. The fundamental disadvantage lay in the fact that Germany was fighting against an opponent with virtually limitless material resources, a stark contrast to German industrial capacity. Every P-47 that was damaged or outright destroyed could be quickly replaced. At its peak, American production exceeded 300 aircraft per month. American pilot training programs were also producing highly skilled aviators in unprecedented numbers, creating a pool of experienced pilots that German forces could no longer match. Meanwhile, German training had to be compressed due to increasing losses and shortages of fuel, which limited flight hours and hampered the development of new pilots. The logistics system supporting American Thunderbolt operations was highly efficient, ensuring a steady flow of fuel, ammunition, and spare parts without significant interruption. In stark contrast, German logistics suffered under relentless Allied air attacks that targeted supply lines and transportation routes, further hampering their ability to sustain operational readiness. The captured P-47s eventually found their way into the hands of the Wunderkist Rosarius, a specialized Luftwaffe unit commanded by Captain Theodor Rosarius. This unit was tasked with demonstrating captured Allied aircraft to German pilots across occupied Europe. Traveling from frontline fighter bases to various locations, The demonstrations aimed to familiarize pilots with the visual recognition features and combat traits of enemy aircraft. This initiative served both educational and psychological purposes. By observing the enemy aircraft firsthand, German pilots could better identify and understand their opponents during combat. These demonstrations also revealed that, in many regards, Allied aircraft often held advantages over their German counterparts, especially at high altitudes where most dogfights took place. The physical evidence of superior equipment and tactics could be disheartening but was crucial for strategic adaptation. Post-war interviews with Luftwaffe pilots who had attended these demonstrations underscored the psychological impact of seeing and studying the captured aircraft firsthand. Witnessing the technical superiority of Allied machines reinforced the growing realization among German pilots that their own aircraft and tactics would have to evolve rapidly to contend with an increasingly dominant enemy in the skies. Demonstrated a keen awareness of when to engage and when to withdraw, leveraging the aircraft's robust armor and firepower to dominate the skies at critical moments. Their training emphasized aggressive, yet disciplined, tactics that maximized the P-47's formidable capabilities, particularly its resilience and heavy armament, allowing American pilots to dictate the terms of engagement in many encounters. The intelligence derived from the wreckage and recovered aircraft revealed a deliberate approach to combat that prioritized using the aircraft's strengths, such as its powerful engine, substantial protection, and impressive range, while mitigating its vulnerabilities. For example, American pilots understood the importance of maintaining high altitude to exploit the turbo-supercharged engine's full potential, enabling them to outrun or outmaneuver their German adversaries. This strategic use of altitude not only enhanced their aircraft's performance but also contributed significantly to the overall success of their missions. Furthermore, the detailed analysis of combat damage and gun camera footage uncovered consistent tactical patterns. American pilots often coordinated their attacks to take advantage of their aircraft's heavy armament, firing from optimal angles and distances that minimized their exposure to enemy fire. They also demonstrated an ability to adapt dynamically to evolving combat situations, switching between aggressive pursuit and cautious disengagement as the circumstances demanded. These tactics, rooted in rigorous training and operational experience, ensured that the P-47s remained a dominant force in the air war over Europe. The logistical advantages enjoyed by the Americans extended beyond mere aircraft performance. The availability of external fuel tanks, which could be attached quickly during missions, dramatically extended the operational reach of their fighters. This capability allowed the P-47D to accompany bombers deep into enemy territory, sometimes over 1,000 miles from base. Such extended range was crucial in maintaining air superiority over the German homeland, enabling continuous escort coverage and reducing the vulnerability of Allied bombers to enemy fighters and anti-aircraft defenses. In contrast, the majority of German fighters, primarily designed for quick interception and short-range combat, were hampered by their limited fuel capacity. Their internal tanks constrained their operational radius, forcing them into shorter, more tactical intercepts that often placed them at a disadvantage. This logistical limitation meant that German fighters frequently operated within a narrow combat range, unable to effectively pursue or challenge the faster and longer-ranging American escorts at more distant or higher altitudes. As a result, the Germans were often forced into a defensive stance, trying to defend their territory with less effective, short-range interceptors. The captured aircraft also shed light on the differences in pilot training and tactical doctrine between the two sides. American pilots, as revealed through the analysis of combat footage and aircraft condition post-engagement, adhered to a philosophy that emphasized exploiting the strengths of their aircraft while carefully avoiding its known weaknesses. Their tactics involved high-altitude combat, precise gunnery, and coordinated formations designed to maximize firepower while minimizing exposure to enemy returns. This disciplined approach contrasted sharply with German tactics, which were often hampered by the limitations of their aircraft performance at high altitudes and the comparatively shorter range of their fighters. In sum, the comprehensive examination of the captured P-47 Thunderbolts provided compelling evidence of the clear technological and tactical superiority of the American fighters in the European theater. Their impressive performance at high altitudes, extended operational range, and sophisticated tactical employment all contributed to establishing air superiority that increasingly marginalized German fighters. The insights gained from these aircraft underscored the importance of industrial production, logistical support, and strategic training, which together played a vital role in shaping the outcome of the aerial campaigns during the Second World War. During the air battles of World War II, American fighters favored hit-and-run tactics, consistently choosing to execute rapid dive and zoom attacks rather than engaging in prolonged, turning dogfights where their German adversaries had a clear advantage. These American pilots often operated in tightly coordinated pairs or in formations of 4 aircraft, rather than fighting solo. This disciplined approach allowed them to maintain mutual support throughout engagements, even when the opportunity seemed to favor individual actions. Such tactics, emphasizing cooperation and tactical discipline, often meant passing up seemingly advantageous chances for solo pursuits if they risked breaking the cohesion of the team. This highly organized and disciplined style of combat execution left a strong impression on Luftwaffe analysts who examined the evidence collected from aerial encounters. Many of the experienced German aces, who had developed personal reputations for their aggressive and skillful solo fighting, preferred to rely on their individual prowess rather than the collective tactics now favored by Allied pilots. In contrast, the American pilots consistently adhered to established doctrines that prioritized systematic mutual support, minimizing reckless individualism driven by pride or the desire for personal glory. This approach demonstrated a clear, methodical focus on tactical advantage and collective safety, which increasingly proved effective as the war advanced. Coupled with their disciplined tactics, American pilots benefited from advanced high-altitude aircraft equipment and a growing numerical superiority in the skies. As the war progressed, their technological edge and overwhelming numbers created a formidable combination that even seasoned German pilots found increasingly difficult to counter. By the time of the Normandy invasion in June of 1944, the overall strategic situation had deteriorated so significantly that intelligence gathered from captured Allied aircraft offered little practical benefit to Germany's war effort. The gap was widening in both technological capability and industrial capacity. The Luftwaffe commanders and strategists recognized clearly that American aircraft and equipment had outstripped German technology in crucial ways. They understood American tactics thoroughly and possessed detailed technical data on the performance of Allied aircraft. Despite this knowledge, Germany lacked the necessary resources, such as strategic materials, manufacturing capacity, and highly trained personnel, to effectively challenge the Allies on equal footing. The comprehensive reports, well organized and professionally distributed among Luftwaffe technical services, primarily served to underscore the technological and industrial disparities contributing to Germany's inevitable defeat. A stark illustration of this technological disparity lay in the disparity between engine production capacities. American companies like Pratt & Whitney, in collaboration with the Ford Motor Company, produced over 125,000 R-2800 engines by the end of the war. This staggering figure of production for just one engine type exceeded Germany's entire output of combat aircraft engines throughout the entire conflict. In comparison, BMW produced roughly 61,000 units of the 801 radial engine during the war, while Germany's most prolific inline engine, the Daimler-Benz DB605, was produced in approximately 42,400 units overall. American industrial output, during the same period, surpassed German production by an even greater margin. In 1944, the United States manufactured approximately 96,000 aircraft, whereas Germany produced only about 25,000 aircraft of all types. The American aircraft production included around 38,000 fighters, 16,000 heavy bombers, and numerous medium bombers, transports, and trainer aircraft. When combined with British and Soviet industrial contributions, the overall Allied aircraft production ratio exceeded 5-to-1 by 1944, clearly illustrating the vast industrial and technological lead the Allies had established. This expansive industrial base was supported by a scale of manufacturing that Germany simply could not match. For example, the Aluminum Company of America alone produced more aluminum than Germany's entire aluminum industry. Similarly, American steel production was enormous, enough to sustain the needs of a war effort that dwarfed German capabilities in both quantity and technological sophistication. The sheer scale and efficiency of American manufacturing, driven by advanced technology and extensive resources, created a formidable advantage that was difficult for Germany to counter, and which played a crucial role in shaping the outcome of the aerial and ground campaigns of the war. Throughout the war, American industry consistently outproduced entire regions of European manufacturing, often surpassing the combined output of entire rural industrial sectors. This relentless capacity for mass production enabled the United States not only to meet its own military demands but also to supply significant quantities of equipment to its British and Soviet allies, reinforcing their war efforts with an almost overwhelming logistical advantage. In the realm of vehicle manufacturing, American automotive factories operated on continuous, moving assembly lines, a method that emphasized efficiency and high-volume output. In contrast, German plants adhered to batch production techniques, which, although effective in certain contexts, could not match the relentless throughput of their American counterparts. The machine tools that crafted the machinery for aircraft production exemplified this industrial might. They were produced in such large numbers that the United States could sustain its own extensive military programs while also exporting substantial supplies abroad, effectively reinforcing the Allied coalition's overall strength. As the tide of war shifted, some of the most iconic American aircraft, including the P-47 Thunderbolt, found their final moments amid the chaos of Europe's closing battles. One notable example was a P-47 designated T9+FK, famously known as William Roach's Beetle. This aircraft was recovered by American forces in May of the year 1945 at Göttingen, where it was discovered among a cache of captured Allied aircraft that the Germans had been meticulously evaluating. This collection showcased the breadth of German intelligence efforts, capturing various aircraft to study their design and capabilities. Photographs taken by American troops depict the aircraft still bearing traces of German markings, parked alongside Focke-Wulf FW-190s and Messerschmitt Bf-109s, effectively forming a makeshift museum of captured equipment. This collection not only documented the extent of the Luftwaffe's intelligence gathering but also provided German pilots and engineers with invaluable insights. The Thunderbolts used in German evaluation units offered an education that, while desperately needed, arrived too late to influence strategic outcomes significantly. The examination of these captured aircraft revealed a core truth about American industrial philosophy. A steadfast commitment to absolute capability took precedence over elegant efficiency. The United States prioritized abundant resources, systematic material advantage, and mass production over meticulous optimization of individual components. This approach resulted in weapons systems that, in aggregate, outperformed their German counterparts, even when German designs exhibited superior qualities in specific technical parameters. The lessons learned extended well beyond the P-47 itself. Every category of captured American equipment told the same story of industrial dominance. For instance, the B-17 Flying Fortress, equipped with 4 turbo-supercharged Wright Cyclone engines, represented a strategic bombing capability that Germany had not managed to develop on its own. Similarly, the P-51 Mustang, which combined innovative American airframe engineering with the British Rolls-Royce Merlin engine, is widely regarded by historians as the most outstanding piston engine fighter of the entire conflict. The P-38 Lightning, distinguished by its twin-turbo supercharged engines and tricycle landing gear, further exemplified American willingness to explore unconventional solutions to complex problems. Each aircraft type, in its own way, embodied the same fundamental American approach: solving problems through superior engineering, supported by vast industrial capacity, rather than relying solely on resource conservation or clever optimization. Luftwaffe analysts quickly recognized that the Germans were not being defeated primarily by tactics or pilot skill alone, despite the fact that American training programs produced pilots in overwhelming numbers. Their defeat was largely due to the industrial system that could design capable aircraft and produce them in such vast quantities that any qualitative edge the Germans held became increasingly irrelevant. This industrial superiority allowed the Americans to continuously adapt and improve their weaponry, creating a formidable technological advantage that proved decisive in the final phases of the war. During the years leading up to the middle of the Second World War, the industrial powers had harnessed their considerable manufacturing capacities, vast reserves of raw materials, and sophisticated logistical networks to bolster their military efforts. Germany, in particular, despite facing crippling limitations within its industrial sector by 1943, endeavored to compensate through innovative engineering and clever design solutions. The goal was to achieve, through ingenuity, what sheer industrial scale could no longer reliably sustain. These efforts were not unnoticed. They were meticulously documented and analyzed within the technical services of the Luftwaffe, the German Air Force. By the close of 1943, Germany had managed to field what could arguably be considered the most advanced air force in the world at that time. Its aircraft were generally superior to those of their adversaries on a one-to-one basis, thanks to better aeronautical design, aerodynamics, and technological integration. German pilots, often better trained than most of their enemies initially, were equipped with tactics that were more refined, more sophisticated, allowing them to maximize the potential of their aircraft during aerial combat. However, despite these tactical advantages and initial technological superiority, the fundamental limitation lay in industrial capacity. The German industry simply lacked the ability to sustain their pilots' edge in the face of opponents with vastly larger industrial resources. The United States, in particular, was rapidly expanding its aircraft production capabilities, doubling output year after year, first in 1940 and again in 1941. This relentless expansion continued into 1942 and beyond, culminating in 1944, when American factories alone produced over 96,000 aircraft annually. In stark contrast, Germany was never able to surpass 40,000 aircraft in any year, despite making desperate efforts to ramp up production. Consequently, the gap in aircraft quality and technological advancement between the two nations widened steadily over time, rather than narrowing. In the year 1942, German aircraft still often outperformed American designs in various aspects, providing the Luftwaffe with a temporary tactical edge. Yet, by 1944, American aircraft had caught up and, in many cases, exceeded German standards across nearly all critical categories. The chasm of disparity between the two industrial and technological capabilities was undeniable by 1945, with the United States having established a clear dominion in aerial warfare. The American fighters, such as the P-51H and P-47N, embodied evolutionary advances based on already exemplary foundational designs. These aircraft represented painstaking refinements, making them more effective, reliable, and versatile in combat situations. Meanwhile, German fighters like the TAR-152, an aircraft developed during a period of crisis, were desperate attempts to squeeze more performance out of an industrial system that was collapsing under the combined pressures of strategic bombing campaigns, shortages of raw materials, and the urgent need to replace skilled workers with poorly trained forced laborers. The psychological toll on the Luftwaffe's pilots and ground crews was profound. Facing an unending stream of capable enemy aircraft, their morale suffered significantly. Many German pilots felt less like honorable warriors engaged in noble combat and more like targets in a systematic campaign of destruction. Despite their efforts and successes in shooting down Allied aircraft, the relentless increase in enemy numbers meant that new aircraft appeared every day, undermining any sense of strategic advantage or morale. The sheer numerical superiority of the Allies gradually overwhelmed German pilots, no matter how skillful their flying. The constant flow of new aircraft, supported by superior logistics and industrial output, created a sense of inevitability, an inescapable conclusion that defeat was only a matter of time. This pervasive feeling of impending loss permeated the ranks of the fighter units during 1944. Captured German aircraft, particularly P-47 Thunderbolts, provided tangible proof of this grim reality. These aircraft were not mere propaganda tools or the subject of exaggerated intelligence reports. They were real, physical artifacts that German pilots could examine firsthand. The P-47 Thunderbolt was not a revolutionary technological breakthrough or some miraculous weapon. Instead, it was a remarkably well-designed fighter aircraft, optimized for its intended role, built with a clear purpose and a practical engineering approach. The P-47's success lay in its robust construction, reliability, and the ability to carry a substantial payload, factors that made it a formidable opponent in combat. Its design was a testament to sound aeronautical engineering rather than a product of radical innovation. The aircraft exemplified effective use of available technology, and its performance, while impressive, was rooted in the principles of good engineering rather than a sudden leap forward in aviation technology. This aircraft, in many ways, represented the culmination of American industrial and aeronautical expertise during the war, a symbol of the relentless industrial drive that ultimately tipped the balance of aerial combat in favor of the Allies. Power, comprehensive armament, and suitable protections, all meticulously designed and produced in sufficient quantities to ensure dominance through the relentless application of material superiority. The ultimate irony of history lies in the fact that, despite having learned these lessons thoroughly, documenting them with precision, and fully understanding their implications, the Germans were ultimately unable to put this knowledge into effective practice. Their comprehension of American industrial strength, its capacity to produce vast quantities of aircraft, fuel, steel, aluminum, and other critical resources, did not translate into the ability to replicate that strength themselves. They lacked the essential industrial infrastructure, including the high-temperature alloys necessary for advanced aircraft components, the precision manufacturing technologies, the rigorous quality control systems, and the highly skilled workforce needed to produce comparable aircraft in similar numbers. Moreover, gaining detailed intelligence about the capabilities of aircraft like the P-47 Thunderbolt did not provide the Germans with the critical materials or the sophisticated manufacturing equipment required to build such aircraft themselves. The Germans could measure the dimensions and performance characteristics of captured airplanes with scientific thoroughness, but this precise documentation only underscored the stark reality of their industrial decline. They had amassed extensive technical reports, meticulously cataloging every measurable feature of both American and British aircraft that they managed to examine during the war. These reports, stored systematically in filing cabinets, exemplified German engineering rigor and scientific objectivity, capturing thousands of man-hours of detailed analysis. However, these comprehensive records also starkly highlighted the limitations faced by Germany. They observed capabilities they could neither produce nor replicate, given their increasingly strained industrial resources and damaged manufacturing infrastructure. After the war, American technical intelligence teams scrutinized these German reports with professional interest and found that German engineers had, in many respects, understood American aircraft better and with greater detail than some American military leaders. The Germans had identified flaws and weaknesses in American designs, insights that American pilots, through experience and training, learned to exploit in combat. Interestingly, the depth of German technical analysis frequently surpassed the quality of American evaluations of their own equipment. This reflected Germany's deep engineering expertise and meticulous approach to technical assessment. Yet, these reports also implicitly revealed a broader and more sobering truth about Germany's strategic predicament. They exposed the fundamental mismatch between their industrial capacity and the demands of modern warfare. In essence, Germany had tried to sustain a war effort centered on cutting-edge engineering, exceptional pilot training early in the conflict, and tactical innovation born of necessity. These elements had enabled early successes against opponents with comparable resource limitations. However, confronting an adversary like the United States, a nation with an industrial capacity that vastly exceeded all other powers combined, meant that such advantages were only delaying the inevitable. No matter how skilled their engineers or how well trained their pilots, Germany's technological and industrial disadvantages made victory unattainable in the long run. The examination of captured P-47 Thunderbolts by German engineers serves as a stark case study illustrating this harsh reality. Despite their technical prowess, Germany's industrial shortcomings ultimately defined the outcome of the war, confirming that superior engineering and tactical skill could only prolong the struggle but could not alter the fundamental imbalance of industrial power. During the evolution of aerial warfare up to the time of the Second World War, aircraft design and strategic use had undergone significant transformation, reflecting a shift toward versatility, durability, and mass production. The Republic P-47 Thunderbolt became a prime example of this shift, not necessarily because it was the absolute pinnacle of aircraft technology in every conceivable aspect, but because it proved to be an incredibly effective combat aircraft when produced in large quantities. The sheer scale of production rendered any individual technical advantage largely insignificant in the broader strategic picture. American industry manufactured a staggering 15,683 Thunderbolts during the war, alongside an equally impressive fleet of other fighters, including over 15,486 P-51 Mustangs, just over 10,037 P-38 Lightnings, approximately 13,738 F-6F Hellcats, and around 12,571 F-4U Corsairs. In total, American fighter aircraft production surpassed 70,000 units, a figure that underscores the immense industrial capacity and logistical efficiency of the United States. Each of these aircraft represented thousands of hours of skilled labor, vast quantities of aluminum and steel, hundreds of precision-engineered components, and an extensive manufacturing infrastructure that nations like Germany could hardly match. To German pilots fighting against them, the P-47 Thunderbolt symbolized American industrial dominance. The aircraft earned the nickname Jug from Luftwaffe pilots, a moniker inspired by its somewhat ungainly appearance, which contrasted sharply with the sleekness associated with traditional fighter designs. Additionally, the Thunderbolt was often called Indiana by German fighters, a reference to the many squadrons that painted their aircraft with the emblem of a thunderbird on the engine cowling. As losses mounted and the strategic situation grew increasingly dire for Germany, some German pilots began to refer to the P-47 simply as that 8-gun fighter. Through bitter experience, they learned to avoid engaging Thunderbolts at altitudes above 20,000 feet, where the P-47's turbo-supercharged engine granted it a decisive performance advantage, enabling it to hold the tactical upper hand. By the conclusion of the war, P-47 Thunderbolts had claimed the destruction of approximately 3,752 enemy aircraft in aerial combat. Meanwhile, about 3,499 Thunderbolts were lost due to various causes, including operational accidents, mechanical failures, and losses sustained during ground attack missions. This near 1-to-1 loss-to-kill ratio might seem unremarkable at first glance, but it is important to recognize that from mid-1944 onward, the P-47 was primarily employed in ground attack roles. In these missions, it faced intense anti-aircraft fire during low-altitude operations, rather than engaging in the more straightforward air-to-air combat where its performance could be maximized. In the earlier stages of the war, specifically in the year of 1943 and early 1944, the P-47 served primarily as a fighter escort. During this period, it achieved notably better exchange rates, especially at higher altitudes where its turbo supercharger provided a pronounced advantage. The aircraft's formidable firepower and durability made it a reliable guardian of bomber formations during these critical missions. However, the ground attack role revealed yet another layer of American aircraft design philosophy, one that prioritized adaptability and robustness. When the P-51 Mustang, with its superior range and maneuverability, began to take over bomber escort duties in 1944, many Thunderbolt units were reassigned to tactical support missions. The rugged P-47, equipped with a reliable air-cooled radial engine and substantial armor protection, proved to be especially well-suited for these perilous, low-altitude attack operations. Its substantial size, heavy weight, comprehensive armor, and formidable armament made it nearly ideal for ground attack, where survivability and firepower were far more critical than agility and speed. The same characteristics that made the P-47 seem ponderous in dogfights at low altitudes, its size, weight, and armor, became assets when attacking ground targets, allowing it to endure intense anti-aircraft defenses while delivering destructive firepower. During these ground attack missions, Thunderbolt pilots frequently destroyed tanks, trucks, and other vital enemy equipment, inflicting significant damage on German and Japanese forces alike. The aircraft's ability to withstand enemy fire and deliver devastating blows contributed substantially to the overall Allied victory. During the course of the conflict, the extent of Allied efforts to destroy German military equipment was staggering and meticulously documented through various means such as gun camera footage and after-action reports. Official records claimed that more than 86,000 railway cars, approximately 9,000 locomotives, around 6,000 armored fighting vehicles, and an astounding 68,000 trucks had been either destroyed or severely damaged in the relentless push to weaken German logistical and military capabilities. While these figures inevitably included some overlaps and possible double counts, the sheer volume of destruction was impossible to overlook, and the tangible impact on German military operations was clearly measurable. This strategic attrition contributed significantly to hampering the ability of the German forces to sustain their war effort effectively. The versatile P-47 Thunderbolt aircraft played a pivotal role in this campaign. Equipped with an array of armaments, including bombs and rockets in addition to its iconic 8 machine guns, it had evolved into a true multi-role combat platform capable of engaging ground targets and providing close air support with remarkable efficiency. German ground troops quickly learned to recognize the distinctive sound of Pratt & Whitney R2800 radial engines, especially when heard at low altitude, as a harbinger of impending attack. The deep, thunderous rumble served as an ominous warning, although German soldiers were largely powerless to defend against these rapid and overwhelming strikes. The psychological toll of relentless air assaults, combined with significant material losses, disrupted supply lines, and interfered with communications, steadily eroded the combat effectiveness of German ground forces during the final years of the war, particularly throughout 1944 and 1945. The narrative of specific aircraft that fell into Allied captivity adds an intriguing chapter to this story. William Roach's P-47D, affectionately named Beetle, bearing the serial number 42-22490 and designated T9 by the Germans, survived the war and was recovered by American forces at Göttingen in May of 1945. Following a thorough evaluation by American intelligence teams investigating German aircraft testing procedures, the aircraft was ultimately dismantled and scrapped, a fate that underscored the pragmatic approach taken toward captured enemy technology at the time. Similarly, Lloyd Hathcock's P-47D, with serial number 4275971 and also designated T9 plus LK, met a comparable end after being recovered, but it was not preserved as a historical artifact. The fates of the pilots themselves after their capture diverged significantly. William Roach spent the remainder of the conflict interned at Stalag Luft I in Bath, Germany, where he endured captivity until the camp's liberation by Soviet forces in May 1945, after which he returned to the United States. Conversely, Lloyd Hathcock spent approximately 11 months as a prisoner of war, primarily confined to Stalag Luft III. Notably, this camp was the site of the famous Great Escape, which had occurred merely 3 months before his arrival. Hathcock was distinguished as the only African-American pilot among thousands of predominantly white prisoners held there. When Soviet forces advanced westward in January 1945, the Germans evacuated the camp, forcing the prisoners to undertake a brutal winter march that led from Stalag Luft III to Stalag 7A, and later to Stalag 13D. Hathcock was liberated by Allied forces in April of the same year. Upon returning to the United States, he played an influential role in the post-war efforts to desegregate the U.S. Air Force, and he later pioneered innovations in aerial reconnaissance photography at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Another remarkable figure was Hans Vera Lehr, who survived the war despite flying an astonishing 125 different aircraft types, including numerous captured Allied planes throughout the conflict. His extraordinary safety record, never experiencing a crash or serious damage to any aircraft during his career as a test pilot, is considered unique in the annals of aviation history. After the war, Lear provided extensive debriefings to Allied intelligence agencies concerning German aircraft development programs, offering invaluable insights. His memoirs, published initially in 1977 in his native German and subsequently translated into English in 1980, serve as one of the most detailed first-hand accounts of the German aircraft capture and testing programs, enriching our understanding of the technological and tactical developments during the war. The evaluation of captured aircraft like the P-47 Thunderbolt provided crucial insights into how the Luftwaffe analyzed and understood Allied aviation technology during the war. However, the lessons gleaned from these technical assessments extend far beyond the specifics of any one aircraft model. For instance, the detailed examination of the Thunderbolt at the Vlan facility demonstrated a fundamental shift in the nature of aerial warfare by the year 1943. It became increasingly clear that victory in the broader air campaign was no longer dictated solely by pilot skill, tactical ingenuity, or the raw technical specifications of individual aircraft. Instead, the ultimate determinant was the capacity of nations to harness their entire industrial potential on a colossal scale. This realization underscored that a nation capable of designing sufficiently effective military equipment and mass producing it in vast quantities, while simultaneously maintaining the entire spectrum of wartime logistics, such as fuel, spare parts, munitions, and supporting infrastructure, would inevitably have the upper hand. Countries that could produce armies of aircraft, ships, and vehicles in overwhelming numbers would outmatch those with technically superior but industrially limited resources. By late 1943, Germany found itself in a dire industrial race against opponents whose combined manufacturing capacity far exceeded its own, by factors of 5 or more, in many cases. The resolve of Britain to continue fighting after the fall of France, the resilience of the Soviet Union which managed to withstand the initial German onslaught and shift its entire industry beyond the reach of enemy advances, and the entry of the United States into the war with its enormous, largely unscathed industrial base, all signaled the closing of Germany's strategic window for victory. The possibility of a swift and decisive German triumph diminished with each passing month, leaving only the questions of how long Germany could sustain the fight and how much destruction would be wrought before the inevitable outcome materialized. In this context, the story of Beetle, the codename for a specific captured P-47 Thunderbolt, and other aircraft recovered at Reeklen encapsulates Germany's broader strategic predicament. German engineers and analysts could scrutinize American aircraft in painstaking detail, gaining a clear understanding of American technological capabilities and, crucially, the scope of American industrial strength. They meticulously collected data, analyzed it with precision, and documented their findings thoroughly for their superiors. Yet, possessing this comprehensive knowledge did not translate into the ability to replicate or surpass American industrial output. The critical shortages in raw materials such as aluminum, steel, rubber, and fuel, as well as the scarcity of skilled labor, factory capacity, and logistical infrastructure, including undamaged railroads, remained insurmountable barriers. Simply put, understanding America's technological and industrial potential was only half the battle. The other half was having the resources and capacity to produce and sustain such a war effort. The examination of the P-47 Thunderbolt by German engineers at Reeklen thus revealed a core truth about modern industrial warfare in the 20th century. This truth was that material abundance, when managed through proficient engineering and executed with tactical discipline, could overwhelm even the most technologically advanced equipment constrained by limited resources. The most formidable element in America's arsenal was not any single technological innovation, impressive as many of those were, but rather the seamless, all-encompassing industrial system that could conceive, design, develop, test, produce, and support a multitude of complex weapons systems simultaneously. This system was capable of continuous improvement, informed by combat experience, and maintained high-quality standards across the board. In essence, the captured Thunderbolts served as undeniable proof of this lesson. German engineers meticulously measured, documented, and reported their findings with professionalism and precision, understanding that what they learned pointed toward the inevitable outcome of industrialized warfare. Victory belonged to the side that could sustain massive material production over the long term. Sadly, by the time William Roach's aircraft, codenamed Beetle, was being carefully examined and analyzed in minute detail, the strategic advantage had already slipped beyond Germany's grasp. This delayed realization underscored a painful truth of the war: that the ability to produce and sustain vast quantities of modern weapons, rather than the mere existence of advanced technology, ultimately determined the outcome of the conflict. The lesson lay in understanding that relentless industrial capacity, managed efficiently and supported by a robust logistical network, was the true cornerstone of victory in the age of mechanized, industrialized warfare. By late 1943, when the skies over Europe were meticulously scrutinized at Rechlin, it was clear that the outcome of the war had already been settled, not by battlefield heroics or technological ingenuity alone, but by the relentless power of industrial mathematics. No matter how skilled German engineers or daring pilots might have been, their efforts could not alter the inevitable trajectory shaped by massive manufacturing capabilities and logistical mastery. The sight of Thunderbolt fighters parked on German airfields, hastily adorned with markings that covered American stars, symbolized a future that had already materialized. It was a future where the true battlefield had shifted away from mere combat tactics to the realm of industrial strength and production prowess. In this new era of warfare, victory was increasingly dictated by the relentless capacity of nations to produce war materials at an unprecedented scale, rendering individual acts of bravery or engineering excellence insufficient to sway the ultimate outcome.